Today's episode is going to be a little different. You know that Solving for Joy is a podcast about joy, about meaning, alignment, and delight. And even though we've said it many times over many episodes, grief is not distinct from joy. And it happens that a week ago today, my mom graduated from this plane. She left her body with peace and ease early last Monday morning. And as divine timing would have it, I am sitting down today with someone who has spent the last 10 years helping individuals and families navigate death and meaningful goodbyes. We're going to talk about the relationships between grief and joy, ritual, storytelling, self-expression, and what it means to be held through loss. And maybe what a willingness to look at death can teach us about how we want to be alive. You're listening to Solving for Joy. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissie, a multi-boarded integrative physician and professional certified life and career coach. This podcast is about joy, what it means, how we find it, and the creative ways people are solving for it in their own lives. I'm so glad you're here. For those of you listening, this is Madison Kuebler, who is a death care specialist and death doula with a decade of experience helping families navigate death and those meaningful goodbyes. She also happens to be a theater artist, director, and soundscape designer in Denver with a special passion for telling stories for and by the LGBTQIA+ community. And she recently won a Colorado Henry Award for Excellence in Theater, which is absolutely awesome. Madison, we don't know each other well, but I'm going to let our audience in on the fact that we met as I was doing death care planning for my mom about 4 months ago. And I had no idea that we would be sitting down for this conversation at this time. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for being willing to come have a conversation with me here.
Thank you so much for having me, Chrissie. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to get to meet you. And yeah, timing is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I shared with you in the pre-record time, I'm always so nosy and curious when people have a surprising job title, which is maybe not surprising to many, but I find working in death sometimes still to surprise me. So how does a Madison, who, by the way, shares a name with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, any relation?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
That would be very ironic.
That would be wild. And by the way, yeah. So what are the threads that landed you here?
It's so interesting. It depends on the day. You know, when somebody asks me this question, my answer varies a little bit.
Okay, great. What is it today?
Today, I actually went to college for theater. That's why I have a passion for theater. I graduated here in Denver from a 4-year program, and I thought I was going to probably continue pursuing theater in school. And it took me a little while to get through school, and during that time I was working in Denver, and I just got to a place where I love theater. It's a very hard world to break into, and I got to a place of finding myself needing what we would call kind of the essentials in life, insurance, a steady paycheck, things that, always kind of dissuade us from pursuing sometimes our passions. But it opened up a very interesting opportunity because when I was 9 years old, my father died very unexpectedly. He was only 30. And I'd always been morbidly curious, I would say, about this world of care and funeral directing or, cemeteries. I don't know. I just always been that kind of like odd, macabre little kid who every time we drove by a cemetery, I'd say, oh, what's that?
What's in there? Can I go look?
Yeah. So it was always at the forefront of my life. And so when I decided I was going to make a little bit of a career change and kind of look for something a little bit more stable in that moment, actually advanced planning came up. Pre-planning is kind of what we called it at the time. We were advisors. And so I found this company that's local to Denver that's been in the area for a long time and started working for them and just really fell in love with it. I think my story resonated with a lot of people because I talked to a lot of people who were in their, 70s, 80s, and they didn't want to talk about it. They said, I don't want to talk about this. This isn't fun to talk about, which I totally understand. But I said, please, let's please talk about it. And so I shared my story, not in the sense of trying to guilt anyone, but just trying to show that that's reality sometimes, is sometimes unexpected things happen. And it's a thing that has shaped the person that I am today. And so that's how I got started in the work, is just kind of not a fluke. I was looking for something meaningful, but wasn't necessarily looking for this work. And as soon as I found it, it just made sense. I did that for about 5 years. And then about 5 years ago, actually during COVID, when it was at its height, I decided to make the switch over from pre-planning to what we call in the business like at need. So I became a funeral director. I decided I wanted to learn the other side of the business, where I was sitting down with families and on their worst day. A lot of them not planned, some of them were, and the stark differences and seeing that, but really showing them the way and hopefully providing like a little bit of peace and comfort in that moment. My passion was taking that burden off as much as I could. Anything I could do to make it a little bit simpler on that day, which I know nobody wanted to see me or talk to me or be in that building. If I could bring just a little bit of peace, that I knew I did my job. So that was a little roundabout way of saying how I got here.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I hear that doing this work is meaningful to you and it's aligned. And I hear a heart of service. Like, I want to be of service to these painful situations, in part because it's like reaching out to help my family when I was younger.
That's exactly right. You can't distance yourself that much from the situations ever when you've been through it and when your family's been through it. And so I always have that lens of, this could be my family. I want to treat them like they are, or treat them like, I am in their shoes, and what would be the most helpful in that moment.
Yeah. As a physician and as somebody who has worked a lot on how to be deeply present with people as a coach as well, I really honor and compliment the work of presence that death professionals cultivate. There was a transport professional who came to pick my mom up last week, and they just did such a beautiful job with their body language, with the, enough, not too much words, with deferential, with reverence. Like, this is something that has obviously been modeled and taught and practiced and cultivated. And I just really feel like naming that and thanking all of the death professionals out there who embody that skill.
I think that means a lot. It can sometimes be something that's a little hidden. The what we do is a little behind the scenes,
Right.
And so
it's supposed to be invisible. If you're successful,
right.
People don't even notice. Right?
That's right. I say that all the time. I totally agree. But I'm glad you had a good experience with the transport person, and it's the little things, right?
I mean, I do have a knack for noticing. And I don't even know the company they were with, but I feel like reaching out to just give some kudos because they did such a great job. They were warning about, we have to use some plastic for hygiene. It will make a crinkling sound. Like, they were preparing every single step. It was so thoughtful.
Well, and I think people who go into this work, that to me, that's trauma-informed care.
Yes.
It's leading with trauma-informed care. This is what you're going to see. This is what you're going to hear.
Right.
Oh, it's so important. And it's something that a lot of people don't get when they are pushed into that world, because we're often pushed. We don't want to be there, right? We're often pushed into it because of something that's happened, a loss. And so having somebody who takes the care to say, this is what you might see. This is what you might smell. This is what you might hear. Gosh, I think the preparedness is so important.
Yeah. And then consent. There's options like, you're welcome to help. You're welcome to be in the room. You're welcome to not be in the room. All of the things. One of the fun parts about having your own podcast is you get to talk about whatever the hell you want to. And I have a desire to share some of this stuff about my mom's death in this platform. So some of it's going to be for people who knew and loved my mom, and she will have a celebration of life at some point talking about that. That's not what this is. But it was such a good death that I feel it's almost a responsibility on my heart to share some of the components that created a good death for her, that it might help others. So my mom was 94 when she died, and she had been leaving us in increments for several years, both physical and mental. The chart says Alzheimer's, but probably accurate is vascular dementia and really like post-anesthesia brain trauma to an elderly person that had multiple back-to-back anesthesia events. Part of our story is that 7 years ago, we were rescued in a flood in Texas from my mom's front door in a inflatable police boat, buried to the middle of the road where we loaded into a pontoon boat. Were boated through the neighborhood to the back of an army truck and then taken to a Red Cross evacuation station. And 6 days later, my mom moved in with me in Oregon for good. So I was able to provide care for her these last 7 years because of a natural disaster. And, you know, there's so much more to that story. It's definitely not the point, but it was such an elegant solution to an elderly parent who probably didn't need to be in their home anymore. Elegant, right. Not easy. And she had a fall, you know, within that first year or so, which resulted in an amputation and then being bedbound, and had all of these incredible difficulties, which, because my mom's character was so optimistic and sort of indomitable, she took most of these things better than the average human probably could. So sometime in late 2021 late 2020 is when she first moved into a residential care home. And so we were receiving really excellent care in this particular care home. And she was completely dependent for all of her ADLs, but had no pain, did not experience her life as suffering. She experienced all of this as peaceful. And while she didn't have a lot of words, very often she could answer reliably yes or no questions and said thank you and I love you and hi, and was just content. So even though this care was intense and costly, it felt so good to see this person aging until she was done, you know, like she wasn't ready to go. And like the people that you mentioned earlier, she was not wanting to talk about it, even when she could talk about it. I would try to open up conversations. You know, I have some advanced training in palliative care, and I support, you know, medically complex kids, especially around end of life and decisions. So it's not foreign to me to have those conversations. And I would try to introduce the topic, and she would just be like, no, I'm pretty much just focused on living. I'm like, okay, I hear you. I will follow your lead. This is your journey. I think that's one of the things, is just knowing that I let her lead and that I advocated strongly when system factors were a bit apathetic about responding to her needs because she was quite elderly and fragile. I'd be like, well, she does still actually need the Lasix. Let's find the dose that works, you know?
Right.
And that's not easy.
Was she always such a uplift, like positive person, like positive presence, even when she was younger?
Yes, and.
We all have that, right?
Absolutely. She was Pollyanna. She would have she was a social worker by trade. So she would extend herself to her clients in ways that probably would not be recommended if you were writing a manual of boundaries for social workers. Yes. So she loved people deeply, and she would give a lot. And if something felt unjust to her, she was quite a character and would be very spicy.
Good for her.
Very spicy also. But one of my friends offered me this poem by Hayden Carruth that George Saunders quoted at a graduation some years ago. And the gist of the poem is that as you age, you know, if things are going well, you're basically becoming love. And one line in the poem is, I'm almost completely love now. And I feel like my mom used all of this time to just keep coming closer to being completely love.
Wow, that's amazing.
What a legacy, right?
Totally.
I will also share that I had the opportunity to do a sacred medicine ritual the week before her death.
Okay.
And I did work in that space of telling my mom that any residual karmic obligation was completely released. Obligations are over. Like, and if it is okay, if you want to go, it is okay to go. Like, you don't have to stay for me.
Right.
And I feel / know that the work in that space also had something to do with her timing, that it took her a few days after that. And she was like, okay, I feel complete now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting. We talk to a lot of people who work in hospice and palliative care just in the work that I do. And it's interesting, like the amount of sometimes, I don't know if control is the right word, but the amount of autonomy that people sometimes have in those last moments or last weeks or last months is amazing. And maybe they don't seem coherent, or maybe they don't seem like they are, that might not be as communicative or something like that because it's towards the end, but it's still happening for them. And I'm sure hearing those words or sensing those words to her was so peaceful and so inviting, in a way of letting go.
In a way of letting go and noticing that there's more grace than actual grief, and there's more sacred than sad here. And how lucky to have a parent this long.
That's
and
right.
to live so well, and to think, yeah, death is not always tragedy.
That's right. That's right. I think we forget that. It's easy to forget that. And our examples that we're given are not always positives. And yeah, I that's a really unique way of putting it. But I wish more people knew that you could have good deaths, because I think fear drives a lot of behavior around the subject matter.
Oh my gosh, yes. And the sweet, intentioned folks who, make understandable assumptions about a bereaved person's experience of death. That's so interesting. I'm not experiencing this as pain. I mean, there is sorrow, but it feels really holy.
Of course.
It feels like, yes, there will be cries. I wouldn't be surprised if I was moved to tears just talking about it today, but they're holy tears. They're not like, they're different. And I keep looking for that swallow you up kind of grief. Like, oh, isn't that supposed to be what happens? And it's just not what's true for me in this moment.
Right. And who knows, like down the road, it could show up as something different.
Absolutely. Yes.
It could show up in 5 years. It could show up in 10, like
all of the above.
Grief is the least linear thing that exists probably in the entire world.
Yes. Speaking of Elizabeth Kuebler-Ross, we got to go back and remind her.
And see if I'm related to her.
It's not so orderly. It's not so linear. It's not so orderly. There's not a process that everybody goes through.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's important for people to remember that and give themselves some grace. I've had, experiences in the arrangement rooms when I don't work in person anymore, but when I did work in person with families, they would say, I'm angry in this moment, or I'm happy that they're not, like they had different, and in that moment, that was what was right. And I never wanted to say, well, are you okay? Like of course they're not okay. Like it, and so I think that's just a really important part of the grief process, just being in it and also having the people around you. It's probably hard for people to conceptualize maybe having a peace around it, but it's totally part of it and it's okay. And it's
possible.
Yeah,
the analogy that came up for me around my mom's passing was, people come to the hospital with a birth plan and they come to their death maybe with a death plan. Like they may or may not happen the way that you planned them, right? I came to the hospital with a birth plan and I ended up with a C-section and all the interventions. that you could have. My mom basically had like a natural, like instead of a natural birth, she had a natural death, like unassisted.
Right.
And she just slipped away in the, early hours between cares, having been completely at baseline all night.
I love that the relational analogy between birth and death because they are very similar. We labor to come into the world, we
Yes.
labor to leave the world. There's so many similarities. So having that plan, I like that you said you can have a plan and
Yes.
you can be set on how you want it to go, but because we live in this world, we know that those plans are always subject to
Yes.
change.
We make plans and the universe chuckles.
That's right. That's right. But it sounds like your mom
Mhm.
got to go out the way she wanted, which is kind of the best case scenario, right?
It really was. I want to share with you and with our listeners today too that it felt really important to me and my wife Sue, who was just like a daughter to mom, um, to sit with her body for a long time.
Mm.
And we did this also when my brother died. I wasn't able to do it with my dad, and she wasn't able to do it with her dad. But with my mom, we spent 8 hours with her body, and I could have gone longer. Like it was
Yeah,
just, it felt so right. I just don't have another word besides right, to be there. And, I brought sacred objects and burned sage and rattled things and played music that is like what I would want around my ethereal self as it was finding its way, and talked about Poa practice and the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying and practices that might help. I do believe personally that the soul hovers for quite a while around the
hmm
station of the body as it's doing whatever souls do as they separate. But we just, touched her, held her heart and kissed her head and forehead to forehead. And I mean, there was just nothing, it felt like nothing macabre about it. It just felt like simple and beautiful to spend the last few hours with this body that gave me life and
that's right.
cared for me all these
I think it's
years.
one of the most natural things we can do as society, like in the last, I would say 100 years or so, just like as we've industrialized and changed the way that we do things, we've taken
Yeah.
that away from people. So when we call on it and we're comfortable in it, which is a thing I think that like taking away the dying in the home process has given us is uncomfortability with being around a dead human body. But it's
Mhm.
so beautiful and it's so once you are there, it feels like the most normal thing in the world to me. And I know I'm I know I'm speaking from a place of where I speak from.
Like,
um, but I love that you got to do that with your mom and and be with, like you said, her vessel that carried
mhm.
you. Like that's amazing. That's really, really sacred and special. I did the same thing with my grandmother who passed a few years back. I don't know if she would have liked it.
Fair.
She was pretty traditional, and I'm from the South originally, and so my Southern family was all there, and I'm sure they thought I was pretty woo, but I came in after she passed. I wasn't there. I was there the whole time, and then the moment she passed, I wasn't. I
Yeah.
went home to like take a nap or a
Such
shower,
a common story, right?
Yep.
It's the
And when
story.
I got back, she had just gone, and I said, okay, well, I want to do something, and anybody who'd like to participate is welcome, but there's no pressure, like giving people this option, right? Because it can be scary to people who aren't used to it. And I think my entire family, like there were probably 20 of us in her hospital hospice room, and we got washcloths and we got hot water and essential oils. And I told them, I was like, this, I mean, this goes back to ancient texts, the Bible, ancient texts in Judaism. Like we took care of our loved ones
Mhm.
and we're not washing them because they're not clean. We're washing them because we love them and
Yeah.
like it's sacred. And so we
Mhm.
washed, and I could see the hesitancy that some of my family members had wash away. As soon as they started touching our grandmother, their mother, and doing those washing and this ritual, and we anointed her with oils and just
Mm.
talked to her like you said. It was so cool to see the layer shed off of people,
Mm.
to see that it's not a scary thing. It's the most normal thing. And we smelled up the whole hospital with the essential oils. Just they could smell it
Oh,
all down the room. We used so much.
frankincense and myrrh.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, that what a sacred time. Like you'll never get that time back, but you'll never forget it. And what it means and to carry that is so special. I'm
It's
so glad
so
you had that
special.
opportunity with your mom.
I am too. And talk about divine timing. If it happened just like 2 days later or 2 days before, somebody would have been out of town. In this case,
Right.
our daughter was actually away at camp. So my wife and I were able to be fully present without caretaking a 12-year-old whose heart would have
Right.
been broken. And, we wouldn't have been able to hold that space in the same way. So thank you, Mom, again, for being so considerate and so thoughtful. All the things. When we were leaving with her body, taking her out to the vehicle, I looked on the digital wall clock and it was 4:44. And I don't know if you have ever used a pager because you're a couple decades younger than me. But in the olden times when we had pagers, sometimes we would text each other 143, which meant I love you.
Oh.
And 444 then would be love, love, love. And I was just like,
Oh,
this is just a little signature. This is a sign off from my mom saying love, love, love. So now I will think about her every time it's 4:44 and I catch it on the
that's
clock.
amazing.
And I offer that to anybody who just needs that for their heart right now.
That's right.
So one of the things that prompted us to schedule this chat, I think, Madison, was also that what we did in our pre-planning with Mom is relatively novel. It's increasingly something that people are aware of, but not everybody has an option for. And it's composting one's human remains, whether self or loved one.
That's
And I
right.
don't think we need to get like way deep into the weeds about it, but I just so appreciate the guidance and the path to have pre-planned that and to not be making decisions in the moment of her passing about where would she go and what she would do. Highlights are greenhouse gases are massively reduced compared to cremation and other chemical pollutants from in-ground burial
That's right.
and just like becoming something that continues to nourish this world feels like such a blessing. So I'll just ask you to share from your experience with that process. What's it like? What do you think people like to know about it?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because, like you said, it is a newer form of, giving our bodies back to the earth in a more holistic, organic way, in my opinion. And I think for most people, it really comes down to whether it's you, the person that's planning for a loved one, or it's the person planning. I talk to people all the time who are planning for themselves. They have a diagnosis, or they're just planning for the future, and just having control over, over what we're going to make those decisions about. And composting is such a cool option because there are multiple things that have, negative impact about traditional burials. We're talking about harmful embalming or cremation. For a long time, those were only two options. And so if that's what people
Yeah.
were making those
And no
decisions in
judgment to
cremation.
self or other who have engaged in all
Absolutely
of those
not.
things. That's
No.
just what we know.
And
No
that's how
right or
I
wrong
started
here.
my career. Yeah, I started my career offering those services and they can be so meaningful as well. If you think about kind of the environmental impact, that's really where, to me, composting, things like that green burial come into play. Just being a little bit more careful because we will eventually run out of space. We will eventually run out of resources. It takes a lot of resources for the kind of more traditional options. And so I like that this is less so about the scarcity mentality. It's about abundance to me. It's about we're creating abundance. We're creating through like composting, we create all this extra soil that can go back to the earth, which we desperately need, especially in places like California, where I live in Colorado. We need healthy soil. That is kind of the bedrock of everything for how we sustain life on the planet. And so finding an option like that I know I'm a nerd and I can talk about it all day long, but it's so
Love
cool.
it.
It's so cool that we're finding these other alternatives. And now that we know, we can have more options. Because for some people, I had a friend tell me not too long ago. She said, "Well, I like the thought of being buried because I want to be like the ancient Egyptians and have somebody dig me up and know what society was like." I was like, "That's cool. I like that."
It's
That
my
we all
own
have our
time capsule.
that's right. We all have our own like internal importance meter of and comfort around the subject matter, and I truly believe that people should do what makes them feel comfortable and what makes their soul and their mind, gives them peace. But it's just cool to have extra options now.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I am planning, we'll see if, my plans come to fruition, but my hope is to actually drive up to the Auburn, Washington facility with the truck and bring back all the soil that my mom
Sure.
creates and have a dedicated butterfly garden.
Oh,
Like, this
I
is
love
where my
that.
mom rests and, can talk to her and share that soil with other loved ones and see her continuing to be a blessing in the world.
That's right. I love that so much. Yeah, I hope, if you feel comfortable documenting or taking photos, of that process, it'll be really special.
I like that idea. Yeah.
I like the possibilities it opens up for people of things to do and ways to memorialize. It's a lot of people don't go to cemeteries anymore. I think cemeteries are the coolest. Old cemeteries. If I'm in a foreign country, I'm finding the old cemetery. Like
Oh,
that's like my
really?
favorite thing to do. Oh yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
doesn't occur
Love
to
it.
me. Do you go do etchings and stuff? Do you like that? Or is it just
I
being
just
there?
love going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I love reading the dates. I love reading the names. I love taking
Mm-hmm.
photos. There's something about, I'm a big history nerd and I just love soaking up kind of that very peaceful, calm energy. But just as a society, like we're transient, we're spread out. It's harder to make that happen. My father's buried
Mm-hmm.
in Arkansas. I don't live in Arkansas anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Think about like how often that is somebody's circumstance. And so to have something like this where you can have a place, maybe it's at a family home or maybe it's in a potted plant that
Yeah.
take with you wherever you go. There's a
Yeah.
lot more possibility.
My dad's buried in Mississippi, so we got that in common.
Yeah. I do visit, but I can't say that it's the most fun visit that I have during the year.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. What is something that you have found surprising or that people find surprising about entering this work?
Oh, that's such a good question. I wouldn't say people find it surprising that it's very difficult, but I think people don't always understand the impact that it can have. You were
Mhm.
talking about your mom being a social worker, and it's very easy to give your whole heart to these families and not have anything left when you get home.
Mhm.
And I talk to a lot of people who are either they're going to mortuary school or they're looking at, a career in funeral service, funeral directing, something like that, which is, this is a required field in order to be in this line of work. Even with green options, it's still very heavily regulated. We must have licenses and things like that. And so it's an important step, even if you want to be in the green spaces. And they'll call me and and come to me and say, what is it like? And I probably am not the best person to talk to because I'll say it's really hard. It's really freaking hard. And if you
Mhm.
can think of if you have other aspirations,
Check those
think
out
really
too.
hard about it. Yeah. And I know, I don't know if that makes me a bad, representative, but I just want to be honest with people. It's a challenge. It's one of the most challenging things I've ever done, and it's also very rewarding. And like you said, I believe I was put on this earth to serve people in some capacity, and right now it's this way.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard. So
And it's
that's
hard. These are
not
all
it's
true at
not
the same
surprising,
time.
but it surprises people,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's surprising how impactful it is.
Thanks for that perspective. My brain goes to thinking that might limit the time one is willing or able to spend in a career like this. So I wonder if that occurs to you sometimes.
I think that's true. I think especially people facing roles like I used to be in consistently,
Yeah.
family facing in person, the type of work I do now that I'm able to do with, being home, I find it as a huge privilege getting to talk to people and still be of service to people from home.
Yeah.
Being in it and experiencing not only the trauma that the family is experiencing, but also working with the loved ones and taking on some of their pain. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard
Thank
work. And
you.
so
Thank
I
you
think
for
some
doing it.
people
And
are,
may you have good
yeah,
energetic hygiene so
yes,
that you separate that connection from what you need left over for yourself and your loved ones.
that's right.
Yeah. Um, what do you think makes for a meaningful goodbye? Is there something, that thematically stands out to helping people when they are creating a meaningful goodbye?
I think it's so personal to every individual. But to me, the word that comes up when you say that is essence, like bringing the essence of the person forward. If you think about, what's important to you while you're here on this earth, and I want that to be shown in some capacity when it
Yeah.
comes to remembering me. And I don't believe that everybody needs a service necessarily. I don't believe that everyone needs like, kind of the traditional church or temple or anything like that, space to hold it in, but ritual. I believe in
Yeah.
ritual. And ritual can look like sitting around your dining room table, but it's
Yeah.
intentional. But finding that
Yeah.
essence, telling stories about your loved one and making sure that they are present with you. And that it's that like momentary thought of like, gosh, they would love to be here. They'd love to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
be here with us right now. That to
Yeah.
me is what makes a meaningful goodbye.
I'm thinking about, the rituals in my immediate family's deaths. So a friend who was like a brother died by suicide in 2015. And we had two ceremonies. One was a small one in Oregon, and one was a larger one months later in Texas. And I think the smaller one in Oregon around our kitchen table was actually the one that felt the realest to me.
Yeah.
And for my mom's, what I'm realizing is that I'm going to invite everybody to wear purple.
Love that.
And we'll probably eat some of her favorite foods and then kind of hold it like a Quaker meeting and let people just take turns standing up and sharing when the spirit moves them.
Yeah.
She was not Quaker, but I like that.
I do too. I do too, because you're embodying this like sense of like it's a peaceful type of ritual, but it's also, it seems like very appropriate to what your mom would have liked to possibly be a part of as well. Yeah, ritual's so interesting because we have, I think, a very limited idea, like I said earlier, about what it looks like, but it can look like sitting at our kitchen table,
It can look like
being
just lighting a
alone.
candle.
That's right. That's right. So, um,
Mhm.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's really, really beautiful.
What else must be said about joy and grief and the business around death?
Gosh, joy is everywhere in the business of death. I know that might sound like an oxymoron, but it's so true because you do have these moments where you're like, gosh, I can't wait to get home and kiss my partner.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get home and put my face in my dog's face and go outside and walk in the 100-degree heat.
I'm so grateful to still be in my body and have these experiences of being a living
That's
being.
right.
Uh,
That's right. It makes the little things just so sweet. But like you were talking about, like you have to practice that good hygiene because it's easy to get out of that rhythm. But once you're in that rhythm of gratitude and also just presence of thinking, man, this life can be tough, but this is pretty great too. Yeah,
it is.
and I want to speak really quick to all of the people that I've worked with in the past, at my current place at the funeral homes in person that I've worked with, and these people, they pour their hearts out, and also like we know how to laugh and be goofy. Like it's so important. I think this is a thing in healthcare. I think this is probably a thing, for people who
Mhm.
have tough jobs. Is you
Yeah.
gotta have fun. You gotta be able to joke around, and we are pros at that also,
Oh,
just being the silliest people.
I love that there is silliness. I had a little flashback to Gross Anatomy Lab, where there are heavily embalmed bodies being dissected, which is a really important part of a
Of
clinician's
course.
training. But for most of those, young adults, I almost said children, like they're babies, right? And most of them have not spent time around a body, much less open it up to see how things work. And it's really different than being with a loved one who has passed. But it is such a jolt also to be like thrust into the face of mortality in those moments. And people do deflect and use humor, and sometimes more or less appropriately, with varying degrees of appropriate respect in my judgment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope that continues to get really clear attention from those who hold that space for learners. My mom really wanted to donate her body to science, but Texas to Oregon paperwork, it was just like, I'm sorry, this is actually going to happen this way, Mom.
Yeah.
And I know you don't mind anymore. I know that she's been telling me since I was probably 7, I don't care what you do with my body because I won't be there anymore.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I hear it every day, multiple times a day.
Yes, I bet. It's almost a punchline.
Well, you talk about joy, in passing. I don't know if you've experienced this yet, but there is almost like sometimes you're so exhausted in the moment of you've just experienced this loss. You're so exhausted. You haven't slept. Your brain's not working on full capacity because you have grief brain. And every once in a while, things like seem like funny or silly, that absurd, like that absurdity kind of slips in, the giggles and everything like that. So I find that to be an interesting part of grief that I find really fascinating, because our human brains can only take so much, and we get to a point where we're like slap happy and like, what are we doing anymore?
Yes, we have to break the taboo glass.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
This is absurd.
That's right.
There are definitely moments like that with my brother, for sure. Like, this is what we're doing. Okay. This is what we're doing.
Okay.
I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being a skillful conversation partner as I got to tell some of the story about my mom's passing. I really appreciate that, Madison.
Thank you for sharing it. I felt really lucky to get to be in this space with you while you spoke about your mom. Thank you so much for this, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us today for this conversation. And thank you to the hundreds of people who have reached out and sent messages of care during this time after my mom's passing. It means so much to be able to share it with you and to share a little bit about her with you all today. And the legacy that I'm so proud to be a part of. If you would like to learn more about human composting, we will leave some information in the show notes about that. In the meantime, keep solving for joy, be well, and we'll see you next time.